Ooh, hey, who wants to bash on 4.0?
Not Will.
Thank you, Chris.
I don't know how
I
many
mean, I
times I have to say that there's good things about 4.0, but the good is just it grossly outnumbered by the bad in 4.0. And there are
3.5 and
some
5.0 are better. That I
well,
understand that. I realize
well
that, but I still
5
like 4.0.
5.0 is better than 3.5. However, that doesn't mean everything in 5.0 is better than in 3.5.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the chat, or welcome to Players of the Games. I'm Will. Today with me, I have Chris and Brandon. Say hi, guys.
hello, yes, I am Chris.
As you probably just heard, we're discussing the different versions of the game. I hear that, Brandon. I hear that.
You hear what?
Due to some kind of glitch with Brandon's system, it we can sometimes hear ourselves through his thing, even though he's using a headset and a mic that's separate. And
Feedback.
and recently, Brandon got a new software toy to play with.
I like toys.
But yeah, as you probably just heard, we are discussing D&D and the different systems because I've had this recording going for a while already.
Oh no! He's been recording us! Oh wait. Wasn't that the purpose?
Do not look behind the curtain.
Okay, geez, you don't have to yell.
I always yell. Don't you know? Ow, that actually hurt.
You never split the party.
Bad things have always happened. One time when I was playing D&D in one of my groups, we decided that half the group should go back to the ship to go get a certain item, and the DM was like, I needed that to happen to continue the story. Thank you, players, for making a stupid choice. And then one of our party members got kidnapped and teleported to a location hundreds of miles away.
Now, there's no such thing as a stupid choice and a bad question. Just bad decisions.
Mm-hmm. Like, never split the party.
Oh no, splitting the party is the best. See, no. Legit talk. Splitting the party is actually one of the best things. It's not the best thing, like, from a perspective of keeping everyone entertained, but if you want the most amount of shenanigans to happen, you need the party to have, like, someone wandering off to go do something, because that person who wanders off is going to get into trouble, and then, like, 9 times out of 10 they come crying back and they bring trouble back. The shenanigans that happen when someone does something like that is always amusing.
Oh, yeah. Of course, then players just making bad decisions in general can be very entertaining, especially for the DM.
Okay. It's entertaining to a point, because I swear there are some individuals that I've gamed with. They're a broken record, and if you see it happening, and the first few times, like, yeah, it's funny, but the 20th time, it's the same shtick, and it started to lose the edge it once had.
But yeah, so we were talking the different systems of D&D.
That's right.
And you guys were bashing on 4.0.
Everybody needs to bash on 4.0 to feel what it's like to be a D&D player.
But
So,
you gotta feel it.
we know, Will. You started with 4.0.
And then I was just going up from there.
Technically, it's not true. He started with version 3. He just
actually
got
no. What happened was when I was first introduced to D&D, I was with the DM of the group. He kind of talked to me about it a bit. He helped me make a character. I then went to a bookstore with one of my parents, and we stopped at the D&D section, and I was looking at the books. What I didn't know at that point was that the version that we were playing, 3.5, was not the one we were using. And that
Exactly.
since then, the next version had been made. So when I went to the bookstore, I didn't realize it, but I started looking through the 4.0 books. So a lot of the rulings and stuff I looked at were 4.0 when I started. I just had that first little glimpse of 3.5 to start with. So technically, I did start with 4.0.
Okay. So, I think we all jumped way ahead of ourselves because I'm old school. Okay, I played 1.0. 1.0 was great because there was literally, like, not enough content and you just made up so much stuff. And also, races and stuff were like classes. It was extremely different. You would play an elf or a dwarf. You take levels in dwarf.
Okay.
It was
All
really
right, so,
weird.
now that we've established you as the the person shaking your fist at the newbies and how they just don't get the game.
You youngins just don't understand, says the youngest person in this call.
What was the acronym? FACO?
Yes.
JCO?
THACO is 2.0. That's your 2-hit, basically.
Yeah. I don't know. I've looked into stuff like that. I started with 3.5 in a game run by Brandon here, actually.
Hello.
We're not going to talk about that game.
Hello.
That was at a different point in all of our D&D playing career.
That was my second game that I was ever a part of. So, yeah, Brandon may be the youngest in this call, but he is the oldest when it comes to D&D.
Well, when you start playing D&D, the moment you can breathe, it's just a different kind of world.
Well, in a way, we all do that. Just because the world is a kind of role play.
But how many of you, when you were 8 years old, went to bed with the Draconomicon in your hand, reading the pages until you fell asleep? I don't know about you, but that was me.
See, I didn't do that. I didn't start with specifically D&D, whereas I had relatives that played it, but I never saw them enough for them to ever teach me it. I had played video or computer games that used D&D rules, never entirely realizing that they were the D&D rules themselves in a more watered down version. But what I did do was just sort of free-form role play when it comes to games in general. That whole thing of just building characters in a world that you interact with in some ways.
Well, and to be perfectly honest, D&D took from different games themselves, and in the overarching kind of what we consider tabletop gaming, but I guess it's more of just the action role play. It's really hard to say, but like, you know, certain games were even converted into computer-based games that emulated what the tabletop games were doing, and constantly throughout the time, different things got changed, you know, what kind of attributes should be the core attributes, how the base mechanics work. Multiple different games have different RNG systems, whether it's a D20, D8, or way more complicated than that, especially since, you know, now with so many different computer-based RPGs, you can get really crazy with your mathematical systems and the base foundation for the game's RNG.
And we will speak as people who play D&D. We have gone and tried out other systems. I know in this call, both me and Brandon have both tried building our own systems to various degrees of success.
I tried building a Pokemon system. It didn't work that well.
One does exist.
I know.
Enough. But yeah, it boils down that when we talk about D&D, it means different things for different people. In this call. But now that we've waffled for how much of this podcast?
At least 2/3.
No, actually, we've only reached about 10 minutes.
Really?
And who knows how much of this Will is going to cut? He's going to leave that in just to make me angry. But I know. But yeah, it boils down. The one we have the most experience with is 3.5, even though 5th edition is out, and
Which is
we've
really
all heard
awesome.
good things. It just boils down that a lot of us don't have the money to pick it up, whereas when we were playing 3.5, 4th edition was out, so you could go to like resale shops or used bookstores, and people were
libraries were selling them. They were getting rid of the copies.
Oh my gosh. I went...
and you could just find these books for cheap.
The library I lived near, they had a Dungeon Master's Guide, not for sale, but it was basically in perfect condition. And I kept it for about a year because I just kept renewing it and nobody wanted to order it or rent it out other than me.
I remember the first book that I bought. So, like, my brothers were the ones who introduced me, and I did start on 3.0, I'll have you know, but we backtracked. So, technically, I started with 3.0, then I did a little bit of 1.0, a bit of 2.0, and then I got back to 3.0 and 3.5. We came back to 3.0, like, just a little bit before they released the 3.5 books to the market. And, you know, my brothers already got their hands on the Player's Handbook and the DMG, but I saved up my money for the Draconomicon. Because it's Dungeons and Dragons, okay?
Now they
The
just need a
dragon
Dungeons
is in
book.
the name. Yeah, it's Dungeonscape.
Oh.
And they even have some other books that are the 3.0, like, full-on splat books. What was it? It was the book that allowed you to literally create your own castle with stead out costs and labor and hours and that kind of stuff. Like Stronghold's Guide or something like that. But, yeah, there were a lot of different interesting books. And some of the splat books had some really cool content. But, you know, the splat books aren't as overly well known because, you know, you really only needed the core books.
Okay, so simple question, just on the edition and D&D in general topic. Favorite class, everyone. I'm not starting.
Which edition? 3.5?
We'll use 3.5 at base, because again, that's the one we know the best, but yeah.
Blaster Wizard.
Why even ask? Why do you have to ask? It's so obvious I'm going to say Cleric.
Well,
Because, whereas I know this, I know that Will likes Wizard and you like Cleric.
But no one
The
else
audience
does.
doesn't.
Yeah. I'm a blaster mage through and through. It's my favorite thing to do.
Someone has to save the party when they get themselves into trouble. And
What?
that's
There's an
gonna
enemy
be your
standing
cleric.
right next to me and I want to use a fireball? Alright!
Yeah, trouble. It's never the enemy that causes the trouble, really.
No, of course, it's always the party.
I remember
Adventure
this
is
one time I saved
the
one of
greatest
my
enemy.
allied characters because I was a pyromaniac.
If I just had to go with the class that, in general, if I just keep it to the main normal classes that you'll find in just like a basic player's handbook.
True namer, right?
Your general direction isn't that way for this rude hand gesture. Honestly, I feel like I'd have to go with Bard.
I love bards. I don't play them, though.
That's your own fault.
There's
It is
only
my own fault.
there's only one time I've ever been able to play Bard, or that I ever did play Bard, and it was in a campaign with Brandon. Brandon wasn't liking something I was doing or something, so I used my character to dominate him.
You don't need to be a bard to dominate.
I know, but That's the instance I remember. The one time
To
it
be
was
honest,
bard.
as much as you will say you're a blaster wizard through and through, you like generalizing. You
Oh yeah.
like magic in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can't ever make him be anything but a generalist when he plays wizard.
No, I always have a fireball slipped up my sleeve somewhere.
Yes, but I say generalist as in you'll never play a focused abjurer or a enchanter or anything. You'll never diverge into that. You'll always go generalist wizard. Because you always have to have fireball.
Okay. Okay. I get what you're saying now. Yeah, I like to have that as part of my repertoire. I think it's because of that someone I'm gaming with right now has instead gone illusionist and put evocation, like stuff with fireball, as a prohibited spell list that they can use. So he doesn't really have any of those flashy big bang spells.
Well, I mean, everybody knows, or I should say, everybody worth their salt knows the workaround to making evocation a banned school.
Shadow evocation.
Yup.
And the person is playing an illusionist, and shadow
Yep.
evocation is an illusionist spell.
And that's the ticket.
It is, but when it comes down to it, like, because I've played wizards, you guys know me. For the audience, I've played a lot of different stuff. There's not a lot that I've really stuck to. And I've played some fun characters, I've played some weird ones. I've played some abnormally busted stuff. Some of that because of the game, some of that because of stuff the person running the game has established. Like my character in a game that a friend is running, who I have a thing that basically lets me move slower, but I am always floating up to 5 feet off the ground. Whereas I think in that game, Brandon's playing a wizard who has a lot of options available to him.
So at some point in wizard, when you get high enough level, you just get so many options that you start to realize there's too many options. Especially when your DM says, okay, we're using all of the books. All of them? All of them.
And that's kind of like the best thing about D&D to some extent. There are just so many options for what you can do. Within reason, it truly is a system for a game that lets you use your imagination. That's the best thing about it.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons whenever I do DMing, I allow my players to use any books they want, because I want my players to have that opportunity to have that creativity. Now, I do understand that there are some classes, some feats, some whatever that are just not really well balanced, but I just prefer the players have fun with whatever they make.
I mean, at the end of it, you're trying to have the players have fun. If people at the table aren't having fun, it's not a good enough game. It's not really a game when no one's having fun, or if someone isn't having fun. And, you know, you can bicker about the rules, which is pointless, because the rules don't matter. It's rule number 0. But at the end of the day, you're there to goof off, tell a story, have a laugh, and have fun. And to be perfectly honest, you didn't even need the player's handbook to do that.
Very true. That's one of the great things about the Shia Labeouf game.
That weird little system.
The best part is, it's none of us three were the ones who found and or introduced that game.
I might try and find a link for the website or wherever that the game rules are listed, and I'll put it in the description. That way people can see what we're talking about. But it's a nice, fun little game where there aren't too many rules about what you can do, and it's really about the choices you make.
You'll probably also put a link to the song.
Yes. Yep.
Gotta quote Rob Cantor.
Yeah.
Fun little meme.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. You look at these... There's so many systems for just role-playing games in general. I have a feeling that when it comes down to editing of this episode, Will's going to just role-playing game talk, pen and paper, tabletop, free form, whatever form it takes. If you have ever played a game like Fallout 3, New Vegas, name RPGs, guys.
Skyrim.
Pathfinder, Kingmaker. Yeah, Skyrim's a good one.
Divinity.
There's all sorts of RPGs out there. And there's always that feeling by a lot of people who you play the game and you're just like, you know, this game is great, but when it came to that one point where, like, we're sitting there and the villain's just monologuing at us, we all have bows, and we just let him monologue for how many minutes or do something that, because it was a cutscene, we couldn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And this happened, and then there was a boss fight. Or, while I'm looking through my dialogue options, none of these are what I feel like this character would say.
But there's one way that you always get to do what you want. And that's when it's on the tabletop.
Because when it comes down to it, you're the one choosing your own dialogue options. You're the one listening to the cutscene. If you want to just hear the person give their motives and all that, you can listen to that. But if you'd rather just be like, well, this guy's a villain, we must do something, comrades.
I agree. We should do something about that.
Yeah, that reminds me of one of the sessions I was in. The campaign ended with this final boss fight. However, the guy who was the main boss and was giving his final monologue, our ranger decided to just... Our rogue decided to just shoot 3 arrows, all of them sneak attacks, and all of them criticals. So basically we joked that 2 of them went in each eye socket, the other into the forehead, and that the enemy boss was defeated. We still had to fight an army of other things, but still. Like you said, Chris, sometimes there is that monologue in games, or video games, but when you're doing D&D, the villain does not want a monologue, because the players have more reaction time.
It's ultimately this whole thing of a person running a game will, like, maybe one of these times we'll have a whole podcast that is just talking about, like, running a game and the trials and tribulations that come with when you're the one in charge and having to think through these things that essentially you're in a race with your players of who thinks of what faster. It's not that you're in competition for them, because ultimately the person running the game has a perspective that the players can't have on what's going to happen, because they are the ones who control the events that happened beyond certain things which are attributed to dice rolls.
Yeah.
And what that gives you is, when you have a good storyteller who can build that world and make it feel realistic, you get the whole experience is even though it sounds cliche, it's magical. It's essentially getting to sit there and listen to a book or a movie, and you have control over part of what happens.
And it's really for both sides, too. Because, like, in a movie or in a video game, Yes, the player gets to have some choices at least, but no matter what your choice is, it will always lead down a path of a recorded or pre-designated destination. Whereas in D&D, your players may choose to do something that completely throws what you're going to do off the rails. And then
Yes,
the DM has
derail the plot.
The DM then has to change what that game might have been.
Well, I was going to have this person be the main villain behind XYZ nefarious event. And then they went and convinced him to not be their enemy anymore because I couldn't find any reason for him after he heard the arguments he heard.
Mm-hmm. I recently had a game where the players came across a random encounter, but because on how they talked to the character, the enemy became an actual villain for the story.
In the game that I run, with at least one person here in it, like, I've been foreshadowing certain things, and at different points it seemed like the player was going to do certain things, and then when he gets to the actual set of what's happening, he didn't do what people thought he was going to. And that's the thing, is
You
when
can plan for 1,000 things, but you'll never know until you're there.
Yeah.
As old military, I can't remember which it's attributed to, or if it's just generalist thing. You know, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Well, no planning out of your story will survive first contact with your players.
Not even the literal initial dialogue or the everyone comes together in the cliche tavern scene. Your plans will fall apart right there and then. I've seen it happen time and time again.
I know I've had to change a few character ideas when I'm a player in order to make that work.
That's one of the other best things about these games, is you will come in with an idea of a character, and then what is honestly some of the best things to do is let that character create that initial idea, which dictates who they are at the start, and then let the flow of the game as it continues mold your character into something else. It's what you see in good books, good movies. A character is not static. A character develops. It's why we have the term character development.
Yeah, the only sad part is 3.5's alignment system is extremely counterintuitive to the idea of a easy flowing character development. And that's kind of a sad thing about it. I know in 5th edition, majority of the situation, they've retooled alignment so that it's not going to smack you in the face if you try to change your character. But the funnest characters that I've ever played or ever witnessed as a GM were the ones that just... They had a vision of where they wanted to go to begin with. They had a story of why they're here now, but they let the actions and the situation guide their decisions and who they became, rather than struggling towards an initial goal. And I think that's probably the best thing, because it's a lot more fluid, it's a lot more reasonable for both people, the GM and all players at the table. And on top of it, that character is more in touch with the game and its world than a character who was focused on, topics and events that didn't come up during gameplay.
That is kind of the best thing about them. You are playing a role. You are stepping in as an actor to a world, whether it's digital or someone else's imagination creating to it. And by playing that role, you are expanding and helping shape that world around you. It is essentially the experience of life condensed down into an entertainment format. And that's the best bit about it. in my opinion.
Well, my parting thoughts are pretty simple, pretty straightforward. If you want to be a cat folk, don't let anyone stop you. You play the best darn cat folk that ever existed. Ham it up, make bad decisions, accept them, live with them, and move on. Because those characters, they're going to have a moment. And it's going to be great. You just got to wait for it.
Well, just remember, through it all, it's all important to have fun with the people you play with. Both the Dungeon Master, Game Master, and the players. And with that, we are out of time. So thank you guys for jumping in with this Player of Games episode. It was a bit more not as regimented or not as planned out as usual. And of course, thank you for the audience for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our talk on D&D.
This is the stream of consciousness version of a podcast. If you know what that is, leave a like. And just because I'm entirely going to chill out, if you're watching this and you like what you're listening to, leave a comment. Engagement with that helps our podcast get to more people within YouTube's crazy algorithm.
Indeed. And of course, put down what kind of character you like to use and what your favorite system is. And make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon. And until next week, thank you all for joining us again, and we will see you then.
Later, everyone.